The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for June the 7th, 2016 is now in session. In just a moment, I'll ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, but first I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. We've got a pretty heavy schedule tonight. There'll be the opportunity for those who wish to make public comment. There'll be at least one or maybe two opportunities. The first will be the normal public comment, which is a 3-minute time. The second will be during the public hearing concerning the budget. So you'll have two times you can speak now if you'd like. We had one minor change to the agenda, which I'll discuss in a minute, but we're going to bring the Coast Guard Auxiliary in to say a few words to the Town Council after we do our Pledge of Allegiance moment of silence and approve the agenda. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd ask you to join me in a moment of silence, if you would. Thank you. Council, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Leo. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Agenda's been approved. Council, need a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is tab 1 in your book. Hopefully you've read that and we can move forward with this.
So moved. To
Thank you,
approve
Leo.
it.
Do I need a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion's made and carried. Thank you. This time I'd like to introduce Mr. Matt Lewis, who's the Vice Commander of the Outer Banks Flotilla, United States Coast Guard Auxiliary. Mr. Lewis? If you would, yeah, you can speak to
Well, believe
council.
me, you'll hear me right there or not. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Bennett, for allowing us and my flotilla, as you see, that is coming up, to speak to the town council at their meeting. I have a little award, a little presentation to give for the town of Southern Shores that our flotilla would like to present to you. The Outer Banks Flotilla 1607 United States Coast Guard Auxiliary to the town of Southern Shores. With grateful appreciation for years of unwavering support of the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary's mission of promoting recreational boating safety. It says May of 2016, but that's okay. We're presenting this for allowing us to use your facility for our meetings, our recreational boating safety classes that we put on. And we'd just like to thank you, and this is a little gift from us.
Let me join you down there.
Yes, sir, come. Some of you are familiar with our class, some of you have been in it. Haven't you? Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah, we're gonna take a picture. Everybody come together and we'll take a picture.
Front row there, Jim.
Y'all smile?
What'd you say? I told him.
Can you get us here?
I told him front row. He does like as much. He used to put one.
Stand up there.
Thank you very much.
Take another class with us. I'll have to. What a nice gift, huh? Yeah. You have something like this for us, Mary? Just a minute. A little bigger. this time, I'll have Merrick to introduce his troops and special annual introduction to the Ocean Rescue 2016 Beach Lifeguards.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. I'm just going to go through the list real quick, have them stand up, they'll turn and face you, and they'll face the crowd, just so everybody can see them. There's roughly 20 here out of, we have almost 60 employees of Surf Rescue. So this is most of the rookie class and a few veterans. Tyler Alberts, North Carolina, football, defensive end. He's now going to be a pitcher. Riley, not Riley. Jackson Young's from Australia. He's on an exchange program with us this summer.
Very good.
Welcome to the Outer Banks.
Anna Matthews, her sister worked for us before. UVA, right? Yes?
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, I'm sorry, my mistake. Becca Leventhal, California, somewhere, I'm not really sure. Alexandra Rabel, Ohio State Buckeye, actually lives in Duck during the summer. Ryan Schneider's a veteran, been with me 3 years, is this the third year? Third year, he's a Virginia Tech also. I'm gonna go Riley Young. You might notice the resemblance. He's from Australia also. They all look like that down there. Somewhere in Australia. Is it New South? Where is it? Queensland. They all look like that. Ben Rice, 5th year. Ben Rice, 5th year. He's one of my lieutenants. Anna Blake, excuse me. Local, lives in Kitty Hawk. Andrew McKnight, Raleigh. Where do you go to school? Virginia Tech. I got a lot of Virginia Techs. Josh Brooks, JMU, 1st year. Thomas Burton, he was actually at CSI, but he goes to UNCW, correct? UNCW, he's a rookie. Walker Ross, you might recognize the last name. He's a local here from Southern Shores. 4th year? 4th year. Kevin Hunter, JMU, 2nd year.
Here comes a couple more.
Matthew Mongren, I know I don't say that right. He's from Canada. He speaks French. Hamish, that's all we call him, Hamish. Just graduated from University of Delaware. Tyler Wells. Tyler's from Pennsylvania, and where do you go to school again? Lebanon Valley College. Thor just walked in. You might recognize him. Please stand. Jake Dinger, 3rd year vet. He can pick up anything if you got to move it. And where'd you go to school this last year, Jake? Nowhere. But he did, I will say he did get his EMT. And Wilby, that's all we can call him is Wilby. This is his 4th year, and he just had VCU? Yeah, he's going to VCU. He was down, you were down south, weren't you? LSU. He was at LSU. And then behind me to my left, Jimmy Helms, local, has been with me for 11 years, is also an officer in Kitty Hawk. Thanks.
Thank you, Merrick. Great job. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Good luck this summer.
Thank you again. Be safe. This time I'll call the town planner, Wes Haskett.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for you tonight for the month of May. There were 13 zoning permits issued, 39 building permits issued. Those consisted of 5 additions, 3 remodels, 2 addition remodels, 2 repairs, 3 accessories, and 24 others. There are currently 15 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in May was $5,962.15. With respect to the June Planning Board meeting, there will be an application review, and it'll be the Town Planning Board performing the duties of the Board of Adjustment, which is an appeal request of a formal interpretation by town staff determining that the property located between 73 and 75 Ocean Boulevard is considered a lot of record as defined in the town zoning ordinance. Any questions?
I don't have any.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Our Police Chief, David Cole. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. The Police Department's report for May 2016. We had 1,015 calls for service. That's about an increase of about 55 compared to last year for May. You can see the breakdown in the pie chart. Out of that, the officers conducted 155 traffic stops. Then if you look at the incidents, officers handled 29 incidents, which are actually crimes that are reported to the Southern Shores Police Department. You can note there that 9 of those were drug-related incidents. And then if you note over on the arrests, we had 20 arrests, and 10 of those were for the drug violations. We had 5 motor vehicle accidents for the month of May. Officers, out of that 155 traffic stops, they issued 70 written citations and another 99 written warning citations. In the warnings, I'd like you to note that we did hand out 3 crosswalk violations for failure to yield to the crosswalk. We're trying to target the 15 crosswalks that we have on NC 12. And then for the local ordinances, we had a total of 26. And 17 of those were for no parking permit, and 4 were for parking in a no parking area, 4 for the right-of-way, and then we had 1 noise ordinance violation. Any questions?
Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Ed Limbacher, our Fire Chief. Good evening, Ed, or good afternoon.
Good evening, yeah.
Good evening, everybody. For the month of May, the fire department responded to 50 calls, and it's pretty simply broken down into 35 EMS calls, 1 vehicle fire, 1 tractor trailer fire, 1 brush fire, one call we had to search for a lost person, 1 carbon monoxide incident, 1 service call, 2 calls to assist the police department, 4 public service, 1 standby, 1 smoke or detector with no fire was unintentional, and 1 alarm system, no fire, unintentional. And that is almost, well, it is exactly what last year's was, 50. 50 calls last year in May also. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Moving on down to the board reports, Planning Board Chairman Sam Williams. Good evening, Sam.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I have a brief report this evening. The last Planning Board meeting, we were acting as the Board of Adjustment, and it's a quasi-judicial hearing, so the town had their attorney, we had an attorney as the board, and this time the applicant did not have an attorney. The variance request, the applicant was Stephen Love, and it was for 64 Ocean Boulevard. Mr. Love also owns 62 Ocean Boulevard. The 64 Ocean Boulevard may sound familiar because that is one of the lots that Saga owned and was going to combine to put up the event house. Because Mr. Love has the 62 Ocean Boulevard, he did not want the event house built right next to him, and he negotiated a sale of that 50-foot lot, 64 Ocean Boulevard, that was next to him. That happened a day, maybe 2 days before the council acted on the ordinance limiting houses to 6,000 square feet. As far as the background on the lot, it's a 50-foot wide oceanfront lot that was platted before Southern Shores was incorporated, and I believe it was platted about 1949. So it's been platted a long time. And right now, our ordinance says that the minimum street frontage has to be 100 feet. So it was a non-conforming lot to begin with. But in our ordinances, it says that the lot may be developed as long as other existing zoning requirements are followed. For example, setbacks and minimum square footage of the building. So they still have to meet those requirements unless they get a variance. The applicant said that he would develop the lot with or without the variance. And because it's a 50-foot wide lot, and our current side setback is 15 feet, that meant that he was allowed to build a home or on that lot that was 20 feet wide. And if you think of a single wide trailer up on pilings, that's about what it would look like. And if he stacked that into 2 stories, it would, be a little more strange looking. The variance request was to reduce the side yard setback requirement from 15 feet to 12 feet. And after a good bit of discussion, the board voted to approve the variance. And the decision document is not yet finalized, but when it is, it'll be sent to all the proper folks, including the applicant. And as always, any decision by the Board of Adjustment, the appeal group for that is Superior Court. So that does not come back through the council or any other group in Southern Shores. And just as a last thing, the last time I was up here talking about variance requests, I noted that we had to delay that other one because we couldn't get only 4 people. And as I had said before, you can have action with only 4 people, but you need a 2/3 vote of the board, which is 4 people. But the applicant is the one that has to say whether the 4 people are appropriate. Because if you have 5 board members and 1 person disagrees, you could still pass the variance. If you have 4 members, you need 100%. That same situation occurred with this variance. And the applicant at the first hearing decided to put off the hearing because we only had 4 board members. And then the second time we met, we had 5. And as I recommended last time, that we get some more applications in if we possibly can, so that there's some more alternates to select from in case we have problems, getting an alternate to attend. Any questions?
Council? Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This time I'll call on Mike Fletcher, the South and East Dogwood Trails Task Force Chairman. for his report. Good evening, Mike.
Evening. I think we're getting in the process of loading the slides. Firstly, I'd like to thank the people of Southern Shores for their strong response to our survey. The data that they allowed us to gather was really invaluable to us to fulfill our task. And also, I'd like to thank the town staff for they've been very helpful throughout the work of the task force in support for information as far as other type of support services. So, as you know, we had a recent survey many of you probably took part in, which ran for approximately 6 weeks, and this is our report to the council regarding the results. Wait till the slides come up here so everybody can see them. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the purpose of the survey was to solicit some input of the folks regarding the issues on South and East Dogwood. The task force had, discussed these issues and come up with a list, but we also want to identify anything we could have potentially missed that the people would identify, and that was also part of the survey that we had. Next slide. It was conducted via SurveyMonkey, much like a recent survey that the town did also. It was open for approximately 6 weeks and ended on May 16th. There were 431 total respondents, and 103 of those lived on South and East Dogwood, so that's one feature of the survey was that that particular group of stakeholders is well represented in the survey results. Next slide. This is the task force's thinking. People, of course, are free to make their own conclusions regarding what the data means. But one of the clear finding was that, and you'll see that when we show you the slides here in a few minutes, is that there's clear support for addition of a walking path on South and East Dogwood. Of course, traffic volume, we all know, has been an issue for years. But a couple of surprising things. People feel it's safe to drive on the Dogwoods. SEDW is just what we use for South and East Dogwood on the slides. People do feel it's unsafe to walk or bike, and there's support for improvements to road conditions, and also another feature of some of the questions that didn't have a consensus showed some strong divisions within the population. Next slide, please. Just to kind of explain the slides before I put them up, again, we use standard bar charts, and also the bar charts are scaled only within the chart, so they don't scale across the bar charts. And also the percentages are rounded to the nearest percentage point, so they won't exactly add up to 100 sometimes. Next. This was question 1, and it showed, again, a feature that was shown in some of the responses that didn't have a clear consensus, and this is kind of this bathtub distribution with a group of citizens very much for and a group of citizens very much against the question. And this is in regards, essentially, a major redesign on South and East Dogwood. Again, no clear consensus. Next slide. This one is regarding a bicycle path and enough safety, and again, we get a fair representation on the strongly agree side. Question, next slide. And this one is again one of those where we could not get a consensus regarding widening pedestrian for pedestrians or bicyclists. Next slide. Again, not particularly surprising that the amount of traffic on the roads, especially during the season, is not viewed as acceptable. Next slide. Okay. I think I already spoke to that. Next slide, please. Again, most folks believe that traveling on those roads is safe, and I think that's actually borne out by the traffic statistics and other data that we were able to gather, that the roads are essentially safe. Next slide, please. There's modest or support for some improvements to the road conditions on South and East Dogwood. Next slide. This is, again, our main conclusion is clear support for addition of a walking path on South and East Dogwood. And pretty strong data there. About 2/3 of the respondents were either supporting or strongly supporting the idea. Next slide. Very mixed results on the idea of a multi-use or bicycling path approximately 10 feet wide. So again, no consensus on that one. Next slide. And again, this one is not strong support, some support for improvements on the South and East Dogwood. Next slide. So moving on, again, this helped us clarify some issues that we had identified and really bring the data into focus as to, again, that was one of the main tasks of our task force. We're going to follow up with a workshop on the 21st of June to identify solutions. This was issues, now we're working on solutions, identification, and we're going to invite the public to participate in that. In fact, we encourage the public to participate in that, and that'll be, again, here on the 21st. And then after that, of course, we'll be writing up some recommendations from the work on both the issues, which we've just done, and the solutions workshop. Any questions? Do you have any questions?
Council?
Not at this time.
I thought it was interesting that, I think it was question 10. I think that's the right number.
That's the multi-use path?
No, question, town should optimally use this allotted space to improve South and East Dogwood trails to accommodate both the traffic congestion as well as provide safe space for walking and biking. And there seemed to be a pretty strong agreement to that, and yet that would kind of counter some of the earlier questions where there was no clear consensus. It was like 50% said no, 50% said yes. So I guess, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here, Coach? Because
again, I can't speak for the rest of the task force as far as interpreting the specific slides. I mean, there's, again, how people respond, I have no control of that, but as far as making it internally consistent. But again, you could draw your own judgment as to why those questions were answered
the way they were.
The way they were,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, that was my only question. It didn't tie in with the old country word G with what everything else was going on. I got it.
The workshop on June 21st, it's here at 6 p.m.
Yes.
And what kind of format will that be, or?
We're probably going to do a structured brainstorming kind of activities in small groups.
Okay.
We haven't quite determined exactly how that's going to work, but I think we're going to address 2 or 3 key issues. One will be the walking paths, another one will be probably traffic.
Okay, thank you.
There may be others.
Gary, do you have a
Yes.
question?
I was just going to ask, thank you for doing this, by the way. As you move forward, you got to have devil's advocate sometimes. If we improve that, as we improve that street, how will that impact traffic through there, which seems to be the big issue right now, looking at your survey? How will that impact? Will it increase the amount of traffic that cuts through during the tourist
I'm not
season?
sure I can answer that question.
I know you can't. Keep that in mind as y'all go forward, because we don't want to do something that's going to create a cut through, that's going to be a thorough through. And I think the community would look for that, but then if we improve it to widen it, then we'd probably get into the situation where we get a lot more traffic through there, and I know folks don't want that. They want less traffic right now, so.
Yeah, I mean, there have been studies done elsewhere where widening the road and doing improvements actually doesn't actually increases the amount of traffic because people perceive it to be a more usable or driver-friendly, for whatever reason. But it's somewhat counterintuitive some ways how road improvements result in impact traffic.
And I know you can't predict that, but something to keep in mind as we go
Yes.
forward.
You had a question or comment?
Chris?
Well, but my question was, as you go forward, I noticed on, I don't remember the question number, but you mentioned a 10-foot wide path. And is that something that you'll be kind of delving into a little bit? What is,
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
one of your questions mentioned a 10-foot wide path. And as you go forward in the solution side of things, is that something you're going to begin to kind of hone in on in terms of the width of a possible path and kind of what's going to be on that path, whether it be bikes, maybe it's just people, maybe it's bikes and people? Is that something that's kind of on the task force's radar screen to talk about?
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, we're mostly focusing, on a walking path most likely, because that's clearly seen in the data. I mean, there was this rather large study done a couple years ago on recommendations regarding bicycling in particular. We can certainly reference back to that. There were some solutions or potential solutions identified there that we may or may not bring up. Again, could be part of our effort in the workshop to look for those kinds of solutions, and as well as examining the ones that have already been looked at in the past.
One thing that you probably know, but there's grant monies available for a multi-use path. I think it's an 8-foot wide path. It can qualify for that. So you wouldn't have to go to 10 to be eligible for the grant money. Just mention that.
Yeah, but there's no exact standard for
Right.
these things. I mean, usually, walkways are 3 to 6, and then it's 8 to 10 or 12, or even wider are the multi-use. So
I think the
very-
big concern there, Mike, has been the wider the path, the more impact it has on the not only the trees, but the people's property that are adjacent to Dogwood Trail. That's where the big issue comes in, I think.
Yeah, and again, the data doesn't show a lot of clear support for that, for at least particularly South
Right.
Dogwood.
Right,
Well-
and understandably so.
You'll have to probably consider ADA requirements, won't you?
I'm sorry?
ADA requirements for the disability. Sometimes they have a standard of,
Yeah.
and I don't know what it is. I know our path, I forget what the size or width of the path on Spindrift is.
That's an
Yeah, I
8-foot.
understand.
I think that's 8.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Fred?
Mike, related to what Tom was talking about, have you had any discussion or given consideration the fact that the town right-of-way in certain parts of South Dogwood Trail is very narrow on one side of the road and can be quite wide on the other? So it seems like there would be a lot of switching back and forth from one side of the road to the other.
Again, I don't want to draw conclusions
No, I know
for
you
the
don't
rest
have
of the
all
task force, but the short answer would be yes. I mean, we do understand that, given, the clear support for a walking path, that would prerequisite some sort of survey of South Dogwood in particular, which I believe is a budget item, correct?
It is, yeah.
And that's one thing we did discuss, is that, in order to make that happen, we'd have to have clear data as to, what the right-of-way is and how the path could be installed if you chose to go that route.
Have you talked to any experts about how it would be designed in relationship to the street? The reason I ask, if it's immediately adjoining the street, it's going to give motorists the perception that the street's wider and could create some safety issues for those people using the path.
I believe Jim did some preliminary work on that. You want to speak? Go ahead, Fred.
Good evening, Jim.
Good evening. I'm Jim Connors. I think what I'd like to say, it's relevant that I'm a registered landscape architect and that I've done a lot of work on bike paths and everything. Now, Mr. Fletcher is correct in that it's very difficult for us with the survey data that we have to design the walkway. But as far as these switchbacks and everything and ADA requirements and all go, we're trying to look at that as best as we can. Now, I've gone through all the files of all the residences on all the dogwoods and pulled out where I could find the road in relation to the right-of-ways. So we have made efforts to collect data. And then also recently, I've gotten some surveys as part of the town road construction that shows where that road is in key intersections like at Wild Swan. So we can, in that case, I actually have topo where you can figure the ADA requirements and stuff like that. But overall, I have started developing a few sketches as examples that we will show at the public workshop. And in some cases, in order to save trees, we may have to swing the walkway down to the road and then just extend the road a couple feet in width at that location only. But again, as Mr. Fletcher's trying to, I think is wisely avoiding getting into too much detailed answers on these questions, because we need to see what the public is saying, you know, and that's the purpose for the workshop. But
No, I understand. I don't expect solutions tonight. I was just asking if you had, you know, if these things were being considered. That was the
Yeah,
point.
I mean,
I
we
was
are
trying-
aware that the topography on South Dogwood very challenging.
Yeah,
when
it
you're
is.
a walking path, in particular, or any type of path.
Right.
Because of the, you know, there's a lot of hills and things that adjoin right to the road.
Sure.
And a lot of properties, and driveways.
Right, right.
what we will be doing, though, ultimately, if I'm not stepping out of lines and saying this, is that we'll be making broad brush recommendations to the town. The devil's in the details, and that's where the town engineer is going to have to come in, because he will be able to get all the topo and, of course, stormwater management and all these other things. But we're working real hard to save trees and accomplish the mission, so to speak, too.
Yeah, you're not online, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Any other questions, comments? No.
No, thank you, Mike. I think we all know that the Dogwood Trail right-of-way is not where the road is in many cases. Thank you. Appreciate your report. Good job. Council Capital Improvement Planning Committee report, recommendations, and from Councilman Chris Nason. Chris?
We went ahead and met on May 16th at 2 o'clock here in the Pitt Center. Mayor Bennett, myself, citizen representatives, Jim Connors, Glenn Riggin were there. We had staff there. We asked an arborist, Andy McConaughey, to come also. And then we had 4 members of the public, including a couple council members, at the meeting. I encourage you guys all to go look online for the minutes, but in short, I'll go through some of the big items we discussed, and there was this was a full meeting, quite a few things that are going to come up probably later tonight. So, in short, here's what we discussed. We talked to Andy McConaughey. He's a local arborist, Southern Shores resident, and he discussed the town's street rebuild design standards, how the preservation of trees have been incorporated into the standards, and what this can mean for town assets such as the streets, bulkheads, and sidewalks that have tree roots located immediately adjacent to them. He went into a lot of depth, brought some really cool tree ring cuttings, and described how trees are stressed. A lot of detail there, as well as some rules of thumb for pruning. The committee also discussed the prioritization of the current study list of potential capital street improvements. And part of this was coming to the council with a budget allocation for $516,000 for our yearly street rebuild projects. And then, in addition, we would also come with a separate line item for $300,000 for the East Dogwood Trail intersection water repair, and that would be separate from the main street rebuild budget in addition to that. We also talked about some items that staff had recommended such as beginning to look at a bulkhead replacement and environmental permitting for Yopon Trail. That's going to take a while, so something to at least get the permitting underway. It will require a CAMA major permit, and it may not necessarily include the street at this time because it's an expensive item, but at least it gets the process started, knowing that it might take as much as a year to get through, and then might be something we see next year in the budget. We also looked at doing some minor asphalt repairs to Turtle Pond Court, Twisted Tree Court, to look at ways to extend the life of those streets and avoid needing to rebuild them for a few more years. And with that in mind, we looked at a prioritization of our projects for fiscal year 2016 and 17 as follows. Number one would be the Yopon bulkhead replacement, including the necessary tree removal and environmental permitting. And that might, depending how permitting comes, that might come towards the end of the year. We're just not sure at this point. A Wild Swan Lane street rebuild, an Osprey Lane street rebuild, and then looking at Juniper Trail, rebuilding in the area of the South Culvert Bridge. There's a pretty steep drop off there, and cars have a tendency to bottom out. And so that was our preliminary list that we had looked at, and it's something that we as a council would want to discuss and consider. And then, in addition, Mayor Bennett updated the group on his recent communications with NCDOT regarding stormwater flooding issues at NC 12 and the East Dogwood Trail intersection. And I would go ahead and ask Tom to give us a little bit of a quick update on that, where that might stand in the process.
Thank you, Chris. I don't want to belabor this thing with Highway 12 and the flooding, but just to give you an update, we've had very positive response from NCDOT. We have not received a formal notification of the number of dollars they're going to allocate to it, but there has been we have good indication that we will be able to get a good portion of what we think the cost will be in the 40-50% range will be covered by NCDOT. We have prepared a resolution which I'm going to ask council to approve tonight and allow me to sign, asking Senator Cook, Representative Tyne, to also go to their leadership for additional funding. So I'm looking at the glass being more than half full. I think we're on the right track to get the state and the legislature and the NCDOT on board to do the heavy lifting, if you will, on this project at Dogwood Trail. I'm strongly in favor of keeping the funding in there. It puts kind of gives them an indication that we're sincere about it and we're dedicated to getting it done. And I think we'd like to see it stay because of that in the budget for that reason. But I think we're going to get a lot of help long term from the state legislature as well as the NCDOT folks. And I've got to make sure we cover not just the area south of Dogwood Trail where the flooding is really the worst, but also the Dogwood Trail intersection itself, where it's not quite so bad, but it does flood there. That's kind of the update I was going to give later, but I've given it now, so you want to listen to it a second time. Thank you, Chris. You want something else you want to add?
Yes, I mean, in our meeting, we also discussed the town property at 7 Skyline Road, which was purchased by the town for possible future expansion of the town hall complex. The residence was vacated by a former tenant in April. The town has the option of renovating the interior of the house if there's a desire to lease the space to a new tenant or to demolish the building. Estimates have shown that the cost of renovations would be in the $20,000 range, while the cost to demolish the structure would be about $10,000. One item that was discussed is the idea of making it an amenity for the town, possibly a park or a green space. But that's something that we would want to consider as a council, as a group. We also discussed the town RFQ for the town engineer. We went ahead and received 2 responses for that, and we did a brief discussion of that, and that's going to come up later. But I think there was general consensus amongst members of the CIP committee that both firms were equally qualified and put together good presentations. And then it's up to us to make the next step. And then there were some questions on updates regarding Beech Tree Trail and Foxgrape Lane and Beech Tree and some of the projects that'll just be finishing up or have just finished up just recently, and that was kind of the gist of it. There's a lot more items in there, so I encourage you to look at the meeting minutes, but that's what we discussed in brief.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris?
No, I was there.
The Public Safety Committee meeting took place on May the 16th. Do you have a question, Gary?
I was going to ask if there's any discussion on the bridge on Juniper. It's bottoming
A little
out
dip,
here.
a little dip at the
It's
top.
dipping- It's
Yeah.
dipping more than it was.
There was no discussion at this meeting, but I noticed that myself.
It's settling.
Continuing to settle, apparently.
Continuing.
Yeah.
Well, to the south of it, definitely, because people were saying their cars were.
They're talking about, I think what they're talking about is that bottom down
Exactly.
at the road to the right.
Well, it starts at the bridge too, though, because
Well, the bridge, what I'm talking about is at the top of the bridge.
Top of the bridge.
There's a dip on both sides. And
yep.
There's a little bit of a ridge on it. The center part's got a little dip, yes. I know what you mean. That's
I
ongoing.
think the bottom now, I think what they're talking about is.
Use your microphone.
I think what they're talking about is when you go down the hill and the road
Thank
to the
you.
left, that's settling also.
But yeah, that whole area needs a lot of work, and that's why we prioritized it accordingly.
Thanks, Gary. Take a minute here and talk about the public safety meeting, which was May the 16th. I was there. Steve Hotchkiss was there as a citizen representative. The town manager, of course, was there. David Cole, Chief Ed Limbacher. Pat Reagan, who's working with Chief Limbacher on some of his long-range planning for his facility and his location. And Leo Holland was there as an observer. The items discussed were, we found there was some line-of-sight issues with the new Tall Pine Bridge. The residents on Tall Pine were having difficulty seeing a car coming from the south. And we took corrective action, moved the stop bar up a little bit, and moved the stop sign up a little bit, and put a mirror, I guess it's a convex mirror. I always get those two things mixed up. I think it's a convex mirror which would allow the people driving up on Tall Pine to look and see if a car was coming from the south. That seems to be working. No further complaints about that, and people seem to be okay with it. We talked about the surf rescues lifeguard stations being in place by the middle of June. 3 of them were in place at the time of the meeting, or would be. The ones at Hillcrest and the Triangle and Dogwood, and the 4th one would be at, take that back, Hillcrest, Chickahawk, and Dogwood, and the 4th would be in place at the Triangle Park, starting by the middle of this month. The police chief reported his budget contains proposed funding for additional signs, I guess speed limit control signs and traffic counters to assist with vehicle speed and volumes. He also explained our police department's involvement with the Highway 12 158 intersection with summer traffic, and what their responsibilities are and what their duties are there is not to direct traffic, but rather to keep the intersection clear. And our police department has 4 of the weekends this year for those duties. We share those duties with the town of Duck, who also furnishes police assistance there, the town of Kitty Hawk, Dare County, and Currituck County. So you have 5 different departments, if my math's working right, that help with that enforcement and traffic direction there, keeping the intersection clear. He also reported that our police department will conduct saturation patrols on weekends, especially on South Dogwood. And hopefully that will help with the traffic issues we have there. The bulk of our meeting at that point was devoted to, after that point was devoted to a report from our fire chief, Ed Limbacher. Our fire chief needs a better facility, in simplest terms. The facility he has is dated. It was built probably when it was built according to code, but it no longer complies with code in many ways. Not just the structure itself, but the electrical wiring and other things about the facility. We're trying to work with Chief Limbacher to come up with a workable solution that's good for both the town and for the fire department. one of the options we're considering is to let our Public Works properties to the west, I guess, of his location on Pintail become part of the fire department's overall complex, and then have the fire department's property at East Dogwood, right near the flooding area, be used as our Public Works venue. Now, whether we can make that work from logistics and distances and so forth is going to be an interesting question, but that's one of the things we're considering. And that would help possibly solve his facility and maintenance problems, and also just access to all of his customers, all of his potential people that would need his services in Martins Point and in Southern Shores. The last thing was talked about at that meeting was exactly the same thing we just talked about a minute ago with the standing water issues on Dogwood Trail. I'll just say one other thing about that. We have an engineer working with us and working with NCDOT's hydraulics people, and they're going to be looking at the options we have down there at that intersection, what we can do, what we can't do, and hope to have that information available, I would say sometime early July, maybe before. So that's the most I can tell you about that right now. And that's all I have for public safety. General public comment, 3 minutes per speaker. And I have Mr. Sam Williams up first. Sam?
It's the other sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Got the wrong sheet. How could I possibly have done that with 2 sheets up here? General public comment. Ann Loeffner. Good evening, Ann.
Good evening, Council. Mayor and Council, excuse me. I'm here to offer my support to the town and to the North Carolina Department of Transportation in the possibility of using the vacant lot on the southeast corner of Route 12 and East Dogwood Trail to deal with the remediation of standing storm water. We all know the dangers that this area is when we get heavy rain, like past couple of days, storms, anything along this line, and something needs to be done about it before someone is seriously hurt or killed. And if that were to happen, there could also be the possibility that the town and the state could be held liable, and I would hate to see that happen. As the adjacent property, my husband and I are the adjacent property owners to this lot, and we are permanent residents there. We reside here year-round. I do not see the use of this lot being used to deal with the water, that it would present any problems at all. The water would be absorbed relatively quickly into the sand, and not standing on the street or blocking the town's multi-use path, which it does most times when it rains now. So people cannot walk on that path or ride their bikes on that path with the water as deep as it is, and sometimes it's up to a foot in depth. Standing water is not only a hazard, but it could be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. And with the amount of rain that we've had, we just don't want to see that happen in our community. We do have the spraying and so on, but it would not be standing in the lot as a retention area because of the size of the area. It would be absorbed into the sand. And I would hope that I've talked with the people from the Department of Transportation. They have assured me that they would not be clear-cutting the lot, that they would remove as little vegetation as possible to access drains into this area to absorb the water. So it's not going to take away from the trees and everything that are there and the beauty of the lot itself. Just want to offer my support to the town and to the Department of Transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate your
Thanks,
comment.
Ann.
Andy Ward. Good evening, Andy.
Mr. Mayor, Town Council, I'm Andy Ward, 147 Bayberry Trail. This is kind of old business, but it needs to be said. My wife Sue and I have lived in Southern Shores for over half of our lives. We have raised our children here, and we care deeply about our town and appreciate the steady path forward we are on. Our many friends and neighbors share these same thoughts. Having served on the committee to place members on this Dogwood Trails force, I was exposed to a small group of disgruntled citizens that were quite abrasive in their message and tone towards our committee. Most of this angst with this group was obviously due to the recent road building and infrastructure upgrades. I get that. However, during the past year and a half, much information and distortion of the facts has generated emotional and heated debate regarding the town council's intention to move our town forward with these much-needed improvements. This politics of illusion and narratives of a failing town government and its staff by this small group has hurt the town, along with our standing in the greater community here in Dare County. Unfortunately, this fog of distortion and half-truths continues. I would like to read a portion of a letter sent to the Sentinel recently as a follow-up on the article entitled Man in the Middle concerning Councilman Chris Nason. It was written by Wilbur. Wilbur didn't have the courage to sign in with his last name, which may tell you something about Wilbur, whoever he or she may be. But this is Wilbur's letter to the Sentinel. The short version is recently, when there was a vote on the party house and some other issues concerning development, Nason has sided with Bennett. Nason is obviously paid by Saga Construction. It's on his website. They were behind that house. Bennett, too, appears to have monetary ties to Saga. So the two Saga vested board members went with a yes for the party house, and the three others voted no. This has contributed greatly to Nason's wave of unpopularity among the town residents. End of letter. Sadly, Wilbur exemplifies some of the thought process and distortion of facts present in this room tonight. However, I can assure you as a town council, he does not represent the majority of moderate people that live here in Southern Shores. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Appreciate your comments. Joe Van Giesen. Evening, Joe.
Good evening. My original intention, as I indicated on the list, was to talk about the capital improvement meeting, but I first have to take a moment to respond to Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward has taken an individual's comments, publicly reported as in the Sentinel, and attributed them to individuals who attended the selection committee for the Dogwood Task Force. He has no basis for making that connection, and I think he needs to withdraw any statements to try to connect those individuals who attended those meetings, who were in good faith trying to see that the town got a good committee. So I absolutely disagree with his approach. A couple of things about, excuse me, I'm not going to talk about the capital improvement meeting per se, but the consideration and award of the contract for the town engineer. And one thing I mentioned at the committee meeting was that because there's a big discrepancy in the individual unit rates between the two bids, and particularly for the categories where the work will be done, which is the civil engineer category and the surveyor and that type of thing, that the committee considered giving the bidders a sample task and asked for them to put the labor distribution that they would apply, and then you could calculate the relative costs for a similar task. So if you haven't done that, and given that disparity, I still suggest that's something that could be done, and it could be done pretty quickly, I think. The other point I want to make about this is one of the differences between the bids is the participation of the previous town engineer, Joe Anloff, on the deal bid. I want to make sure that you note that Mr. Anloff was primarily involved in the design and the specification of the hydroclone dewatering system that was attempted to be employed for the canal dredging project. That I get that information from the public documents that were associated with the suit that was filed against the town and other individuals, including Mr. Anloff. So if those facts are incorrect, that's where I got them from. That project is not described in the deal proposal. It is not included. Many, many other projects that Mr. Anloff participated and successfully completed, designs for the town were included. That one was excluded. I suggest that that project needs to be considered as part of his record, as part of his qualifications and his performance, because it cost us that particular project. And I'm not saying it's all his fault. I think that project was the result of a committee. There were other people managing it. There were other engineers involved. The whole town council had to participate in decisions to award the contracts, et cetera. But I think it was omitted from his proposal, and I think it needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. At our last council meeting, we had a husband and wife that wanted to speak, but all the council members were not here, so they declined speaking that night. Bill and Sue Broadus. Since that time, Mr. Broadus and his wife have sent me an email writing to request that this email be read at the town council meeting during the public comment portion, as we cannot attend it in person due to medical conflict. And he says in his letter to the Southern Shores Town Council, our comments today are intended to reinforce our written correspondence to you on April 23rd. This was an email he sent to council, each council member, concerning the standing water issue at the corner of Route 12 and East Dogwood Trail. We encourage you, council, to be very proactive in solving the water drainage issue at the corner of Route 12 and East Dogwood Trail. This is a major safety issue, and one, if not resolved, will ultimately result in serious injury or even death. We live at this corner and have seen firsthand the danger of standing water and traffic that fails to slow down and or careens into the center lane. You've heard all this before, but I wanted to repeat it because he really wanted it said. We understand that much of the work has been done by both the town and the state DOT to fully define the issues and to come up with alternatives. Studying the alternatives ad infinitum or adding more options when potential lives are at stake does not seem at all prudent. Let it not be said that the council members of our great town want to study something to death and they don't like the proposed solution. We hope you trust the recommendations of the town staff. You hired them because you felt they were qualified and capable. Take the recommendations and move on. We are also of the opinion that anyone who states this is not a town problem does not understand the role of the town government. Again, in our opinion, that your charter should be to work for the welfare of our town citizens and anyone else that issue puts in harm's way. This issue puts in harm's way. It would be a shame if someone is so seriously injured or killed and someone asked how this happened and the response being, well, the town said it was not their problem. We are not attorneys. Everybody sues these days, and we'll bet the cost of litigation will far exceed any dollars the town contributes to solving this issue, even if the town wins. We encourage you to pass the budget as proposed by the town staff and empower the town manager to work proactively on a speedy completion of the construction required to bring this issue to closure. The money you have allocated should be left in place so it can be used to best solve any standing water issues on Route 12. In closing and changing the subject, we would like to express our opinion of the fringe benefit issue. We have heard that there's a discussion about cutting back the fringe benefits of our town employees. If this is true, we question this from both a financial as well as a personnel perspective. We need the best of the best town employees, and turnover is a costly expense. The budget as proposed saves over $1 million. We don't need to save any more by cutting fringe benefits and then increasing our training costs due to high turnover. Thank you for the opportunity to express our opinions in written form as we were unable to attend. Bill and Sue Broadus, 31 East Dogwood Trail. Thank you for letting me read that. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of your comments tonight from the public. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Rasko to give us an overview of the proposed budget for 2016-2017.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. Prior to public hearing,
give a summary of the budget that was filed and presented to the council on May the 3rd. At that time, of course, it was filed and it was made available to the public of the town via our various media, and also available for hard copy inspection in the town hall. Proposed was a $5.7 million budget for the town operations for the upcoming fiscal year 2016-2017. This represents a decrease in the amount of the budget from the current year of basically $1.1 million. The proposed budget calls for no tax rate increase. It also calls for no transfer of unassigned fund balance to balance the budget. The budget, of course, is a balanced budget as required by law. There is no expense in the budget for debt or debt service, the town having retired all debt during the previous fiscal year. This budget provides for, as proposed, provides for continued funding of the town's capital improvement plan for the remaining failing streets in the town in an amount of $516,000, the same amount as the current year. It also provides funding for a potential physical survey of the south and east Dogwood Trail right-of-ways to determine encroachments and also the location of that street. It also contains a proposal of $300,000 for remedial measures for flooding along NC Highway 12 in the area of the East Dogwood Trail. And I'd note that these three items that are included as capital items do require, if the council were to adopt this budget, it also requires a subsequent and separate approval of those particular projects, the proposed budget ordinance. That being said, I've been asked several times about monies for the flooding at NC 12 and East Dogwood Trail. What would happen if the state contributed towards that a certain amount and the town would not have to pay all of that? So two or three options would occur if that money were not used for that particular purpose. If the council did not use the remaining of the money for any purpose during the year, it would revert on June 30 of 2017 back to the unassigned fund balance. If the council preferred to use that money, it could use so for any other item in any other budget line or new budget line by a budget amendment. And of course, one of those could be the capital reserve fund. If the council chose to do that, it could amend the budget and put that remaining money back into the capital reserve fund. This budget also represents significant savings due to the new solid waste collection contract that the council authorized to put into effect July 1. It also provides for funding of the completion of the contract obligation for modernization of the town code that we currently are under contract with Code Right for. That will require a subsequent budget amendment to move that into another location of the budget at the proper time for auditing principles, but currently it is in the admin department budget. It does also provide for a direct appropriation to the capital reserve fund for future capital needs. Recall, over the last few years, the capital reserve fund has had a minimal balance in it. This would put those funds into that and increase that fund for this particular year and for years after, as the council saw fit to put more money into that fund. The current financial highlights for the town, just a reminder, as of the last audit date of June 30, 2015, the town's assets exceed its liabilities by $12,170,628. And also the unassigned fund balance as of June 30, 2015 was $3,366,840. And again, that is the unassigned fund balance for the town. Just again to go through the highlights of the budget as it was presented and filed. The pie chart in the proposed budget of general fund revenues shows the ad valorem tax is the largest revenue generator for the town of Southern Shores. Ad valorem tax in Southern Shores is represented by 22 cents of rate on the values as computed by statute, and that brings in 51% of this town's revenue. The distributed taxes of occupancy, sales tax, and land transfer, the town of Southern Shores portion of those, collected countywide, is results in 35% of the town's revenue. Unrestricted intergovernmental revenues, which we get from various state sources, and they go into the general fund, represent 8%. And restricted governmental revenues, which are used for a specific purpose, like the Powell Bill Fund for street improvements, is represented by 4%. Permits and fees in Southern Shores accounts for 2% of the revenue, and then other revenues account for less than 1%. Similar pie chart for the general fund expenditures. Starting at the bottom left, the streets, bridges, and canals is a budget unit administered by Public Works. It has its budget each year, and that represents 20% of the town's expenditures. Public Works Department, its main operations, is represented by 7% of the expenses, and the town sanitation, which is recycling and trash collection, is 11%. Its contracted fire services is represented by 8% of the expenses, and the town's service for ocean rescue during our seasonal months is 3%. And the administration of the town is represented by 17%, and the code enforcement, which includes our planning staff, is represented by 5%. The general fund summary, as you recall, there are three funds that are included in the proposed budget. One is the general fund, one is the cemetery fund, and one is the capital reserve fund. And just to summarize the general fund, the revenues are shown in the FY 16-17 recommended. Again, ad valorem taxes at 51% is $2.9 million. And the other revenues, which I went over, of occupancy, sales, land transfer, restricted and unrestricted, $2.7 million. So the total revenues projected for the town for the upcoming fiscal year are $5.7 million. The expenditures by department and budget function, you can see starting there, the administration department is $1,019,953. Included in that by notation is the remaining contractual obligation for Code Right of $65,470. If the council adopts this budget, the staff would make a request sometime late summer after July 1, that amount be transferred by budget amendment back to the planning and code enforcement department for payment as the invoices come due during the year. The next item is the code enforcement department, $206,090. The police department, $1.6 million. Streets, bridges, and canals, $1.1 million in the percentages that we went over on the pie chart. And Public Works Department, $384,721. Sanitation services, $647,300. And the contracted fire services, which are by contract, $476,880. Also, another contracted services, ocean rescue for the seasonal protection of the beaches, $161,550. You can also see there is a designation to the Capital Reserve Fund, specific designation of $20,000. $10,000 of that is a build-up for canal bottom maintenance, and $10,000 of that for income and channel maintenance. You can also see the projected transfer out to Capital Reserve of $85,506 to begin to build that fund. I did want to call your attention to the streets, bridges, and canals page in particular. Of the projected budget. Again, this is a separate budget unit that is included each year or developed each year on recommendation of the town auditor because of the amount that the town puts into infrastructure upgrades. You can see at the top of the FY16-17 recommended line, the typical items. One new one this year proposed are funds to engage in arborist services as part of the general engineering services that are not particular tagged with a particular project. So that's a separate item this year, arborist services. Street maintenance is the normal street maintenance, non-capital in nature, for repairs, $59,702. And the brush trimming are items of brush trimming along the street right-of-ways and in canals, et cetera, $18,000. Bridge maintenance there, again, non-capital in nature, $1,500. Coming down, the FY16-17 street projects, you can see a figure there of $516,000. That is projected just as years past per council practice. That's certainly not, that's not picked out of the air, but it basically is equal to the amount of tax rate that's computed previously to January 1, 2013. That was 3 cents of tax rate, and that, of course, it computes out at revenue neutral, a little bit higher than that. But it has been consistently $516,000 with the exception of one particular year when it was higher. Waterway maintenance and repairs, the town's contribution there to with the other entities that help to maintain the incoming channel day markers into the town canal system. There are 3 other entities that make that same contribution each year. The next line is storm debris cleanup, and that is for storms that are unnamed and non-declared by the President of the United States to engage in FEMA reimbursement. In case there is a storm where there's not any FEMA reimbursement, we try to set aside that each year to pay for the extra pickup along the streets. Also, you'll see an amount there of bulkhead maintenance and repair, the second year that is proposed to you for actual repair and maintenance of the town-owned bulkheads. When the town acquired the streets in the town, also came right away, and fortunately or unfortunately, there became some aging bulkheads with those particular right-of-ways. So that is, again, projected for that. The last 2 items, as I spoke before, $300,000 for a stormwater flooding remedial project at the corner of NC Highway 12 and East Dogwood Trail. I proposed that based on discussions with Division 1 engineers who thought that that was a budget figure. And again, recall, as we've talked before, the Division 1 is able to provide some construction in the street, the boxes and piping, and it would look for the town, under the latest concept that we talked about, look for the town to acquire potentially an area for gathering stormwater and infiltrating stormwater. If that is the project that the town chooses to engage in, there would be the money available. Again, that figure, the 516 figure, and the next figure that is proposed for the Dogwood Trail Physical Survey would actually be considered by the council even after you adopt this budget. So the budget ordinance as drafted would require those 3 items to be spent only after you approved these particular projects that they represent. That is the general fund synopsis. The second fund is the town cemetery fund. Again, recall that each year out of the cemetery's undesignated fund balance, the council has chose to appropriate a certain amount each year, and also we anticipate certain amount of sales of plots in the cemetery. So the projected revenue for this year is $11,180. Out of that come the expenses for a part-time seasonal worker, also some beautification funds and software license that we maintain for the cemetery mapping for the plots. Also noted there, you'll see that the balance in the cemetery fund, the Town Southern Shore Cemetery Fund, as of last audit date, June 30, 2015, is $46,908. The
Capital Reserve Fund is the next item, the next fund that the town administers. The very first line is the transfer in, proposed transfer in from the general fund of the $20,000 for the incoming channel and the canal bottoms maintenance, $10,000 for each of those. So that would be a total activity of $20,000. On the side, you'll see the other activity, the total balance of your capital reserve fund as of June 30, 2015, last audit date, was $50,767. On the front, in the summary, I described to you the proposed addition to the capital reserve fund this year of $85,506, and also the balance of the canal and incoming channel, $40,000 money. That makes the balance of the capital reserve fund to be used for other capital projects of $96,273. And that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, is a brief synopsis of the budget that was presented. Again, it was on file since May 3rd, and there was some activity online for inspection. There was some review and discussion, but the budget was available for public review.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. This time, I'll turn the meeting over to our town attorney for a public hearing for fiscal year 2016-2017 proposed budget and consideration of budget ordinance 2016-06-01.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As he said, this is the public hearing for this year's fiscal year 2016-17 budget ordinance. I'll call the names who are first on the list. When I get through the list, I'll ask if there's anyone else who wants to speak. If you could keep your comments short as possible, that would be appreciative. I'm not going to hold you to 3 minutes right now, but we'll start with Sam Williams.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Sam Williams, 109 Pudding Pan Lane. I've got 3 items that I would ask you to support. They're line items that appear on pages 23 and 24. The first one is the Dogwood Trail Physical Survey. When Mr. Fletcher was talking about the Dogwoods Task Force, he mentioned the importance of that. That's something I think needs to be supported. The second item is the engineering and arborist services. I think that the use of an arborist for several things associated with not only the Dogwood Task Force, but also for any road rebuilds that come up. And the last item is the East Dogwood Trail stormwater mitigation item, which has been mentioned several times this evening. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Pat Wilson.
Good evening, Council. And people in the audience. I understand that some of you on the Council want to take away the benefits of the men and the women in the police department, as well as the town employees. Our policemen put their lives on the line for us every day. They have wives and husbands and children. And I beg you, don't take anything away from them. They deserve everything that we can give them. Our town employees do a great job for us. They keep this town shipshape. And they are always eager to help in any way possible whenever I go to them for information. Please don't take their benefits away either. They're well-trained. They've done a good job for this town. I beg you, Don't do this. Don't take away their benefits. Believe it or not, we're all connected to one another. As human beings, we're all made out of the same cosmic dust. So let's treat each other like we would like to be treated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Ward? And thank you, Ms. Wilson. Andy Ward?
Good evening, council, Mr. Mayor, town staff. Just looking over some things before I jotted down a few notes. Transparency was certainly the mantra of the candidates running for a seat on town council this past November. I'm not so sure having pre-council strategy meetings with an agenda and talking points for certain council members prior to a town council meeting quite qualifies as being totally transparent, but I guess nothing beats keeping the base satisfied. I am, however, thankful for the transparency afforded me by Sheila, our town clerk, and by our town government. I have formally requested and have received several items of interest concerning budget matters that you all will debate later on tonight. It appears to me the main force and focus of what I requested involved what our town employees are paid in both salary and stipend, or the cafeteria money, for dependent health care. Reading through the info I requested, from salary spreadsheets to emails sent between the town manager, the town finance officer, and town council members, it was apparent that the town employees' health care cost to the town was in line with what other towns throughout Dare County pay. And this was adding in the stipend for dependent health care afforded our employees. Also looking through some email correspondence between Bonnie Swain, our finance officer, town manager Rasco, and Councilman McDonald, I was very disturbed, would put it mildly, the accusations from Mr. McDonald towards Ms. Swain that she was, quote, deceiving and, quote, misleading to me as a council member. As a council member, you should never use your position to bully town staff. As a citizen who works with our town staff on a professional level, I take exception to this type of behavior. An editorial I read this past Sunday in the News and Observer by Ned Barnett about NC State, North Carolina State employees had an interesting parallel with our town employees. He started his piece off with, quote, "If you regard government as a necessary evil, you don't think much of government employees. This disdain is plain in North Carolina," end quote. Mr. Barnett went on to say, North Carolina's conservative leaders who claim to know so much about business seem not to grasp the essential roles of employees. The level of their expertise and morale will determine whether an enterprise succeeds. And that applies to all organized efforts, public or private, end quote. To paraphrase Mr. Barnett's ending to his piece, letting talented, experienced workers drain out of government and demeaning those who remain won't produce some magic tonic for success. We have a great group of people and town employees, and that morale is fostered under the leadership of Mr. Rasco here, and should certainly be appreciated. It's an intangible that doesn't necessarily show up on a spreadsheet. Just ask the people that serve under his direction. These folks deserve the pay that they were hired with and our respect and our gratitude for their honest, hard work and service to our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else in the audience who would like to speak, if you could raise your hand, I'll recognize you and call you to the podium. Mr. Connor.
Again, Jim Connors, I live at 83 Duckwoods Drive. I just want to go on record as supporting the budget items or the proposed budget allocations for the physical survey of the dogwoods and the allocations to help solve the problem of the flooding on NC 12-158 intersection. And this has got to go on record as the shortest time that I've ever spoke here.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Is there anyone else? If you'd raise your hand. Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone else. I'll close the public hearing for the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget. And
Thank you
back
very
to
much.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd make a motion that we, council, accept, adopt as proposed the budget for 2016-2017 as presented by our town manager and our town staff.
So moved. I'll move that we approve this budget as presented by our budget officer and town manager.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion?
Just a couple of questions. Could you, Peter, tell us what percent of the budget is benefits and salaries?
Approximately 37%.
Thank you. See, I've been put out there tonight. Cafeteria benefits were in the budget as a line item, and I'm still not sure, and I'm on the council, exactly what they're used for. I've never got a straight answer. And I guess I have a question. Health benefits, what does that cover particularly? Actually, specifically.
Okay, yeah, I can defer
Well,
to
I'll
Bonnie.
let the manager answer
Okay,
that, please.
health benefits, in the line is explained, there is a benefit for health coverage for each employee.
Okay,
There's
and I guess my question is, the line item, for example, for you, does that cover you and your dependents?
No, it does not.
It only covers you?
Only covers me, and I've reported that to the council several times now. Only me.
Only you?
Yes, sir, only me.
That's the clarification I needed a long time ago.
That was given to you several times.
Never in a straight shot.
This is as straight as it gets. That benefit applies to every single employee, and it is for hospitalization insurance only. It is not for dependents.
Okay, what
It is
about
for
the
me.
cafeteria plan?
The cafeteria plan was explained to the council and each individual council member via email. That is a benefit that the town provides to each employee, every employee, to be able to purchase dependents' health insurance, to go towards their purchase of dependents' health insurance. That is a separate benefit than the health insurance for each employee.
And if they have no dependents, they still get that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Be clear on that. And our provider is Blue Cross Blue Shield?
That is the provider that's proposed for this year. That's correct, and it is Blue Cross Blue Shield for this year as well.
Anything else, Gary?
You know, I do have to say that a lot of our community are retirees. And, you know, Social Security is, I think, a zero raise this year as far as COLA. The state is a zero raise for retirees. I think everybody's holding tight. For the last 5 years, we've given 2.5%, which is and everybody else has been pretty much holding the line at zero or less than 1%. and no one's benefiting from that as far as our employees are, and that's good. That's my take on it, is that I think what we should be doing is giving what the majority of our community is getting, and the majority of our community is getting nothing this year. If you're a retiree, state, federal, or just Social Security, the proposed is 0%. So I would propose that we take out the 2.5% COLA raise that we have in our budget for our employees this year.
Are you making that as an amendment?
Make that as an amendment. I would also like for that cafeteria benefit to be included into the health insurance line item from this point forward, if it is a health insurance.
Let's take one amendment at a
Okay.
time. Do I have a second for that amendment?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion, council?
I'd like to discuss it. I agree with what Gary said. The cost of living really hasn't gone up that much this year. 2.5%, I think, is excessive. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to take benefits away from employees. I was a government employee myself for 31 years with the federal government. I want to say this, some of your benefits are a lot better than I ever got, and I worked for an organization that I thought was pretty generous. So don't get me wrong, I'm not begrudging you of anything, but considering the population of the town and the fact that others are not getting this kind of benefit, there's a lot of resentment from some of the citizens, and I don't want to take benefits away from you, but I just want to bring things in line. We're not trying to cut your salaries or any of that, but it's we have a duty to the citizens of the town to manage the budgets as well as we can, manage taxpayers' money, and that's the concern. So I support Gary and what he's proposed in the amendment.
Leo, you have any thoughts?
I don't think we need to be touching it. Yes, we as retirees know that when you go into it, you may get a cost of living increase, you may not. I went into my retirement knowing Deere does not give cost of living. So, but I think our people here, when you live in Dare County, it's not cheap. And the other side of the coin is we do not have a large labor pool that if somebody leaves, we can go find a qualified person. We're not in Hampton Roads. We're not in Richmond, Virginia. We're not in Raleigh, North Carolina. We do not have a big labor pool. And we need to do whatever it is to protect our town staff, our police department, and fire department. And that's where I stand.
Thank you, Leo. Chris?
If possible, I'd like to ask Peter just a couple questions. Peter, is the budget you're proposing a balanced budget?
Yes.
Are you proposing a tax increase?
No,
Do we have any debt as a town?
we do not.
Are we giving to our capital reserve fund as part of the budget?
Yes.
Thank you.
My only comment is that we're paying approximately 37% of our total budget goes to our employees' salary and benefits total. We're the lowest, I think, on the Outer Banks by far. Duck has a similar number of employees to ours, and their employee maintenance budget, if you will, their salaries and benefits is over 40%, 41, 42% of their budget. Kitty Hawk has somewhere close to 50%. Now, they have more employees than we do, but the percentage of cost to their total budget is much higher than ours. I think we're operating at the lower end of the spectrum. I think we're fortunate to have the quality employees we have, and they've been willing to stay with us and work as hard as they do for our town. I'm totally against monkeying around, if you will, with their wages or their benefits in any way. Any further discussion on this issue?
Move on.
I'll call for a vote on that, on Gary's amendment. All in favor? 2. All opposed? Same sign.
Opposed.
Aye. Any further discussion on my original
Yes,
motion to approve the budget?
I would move that we move that cafeteria line item into the health benefit line item.
Can I say something on that, Mr. McDonald? That, we cannot do that because the cafeteria money is a taxable benefit. So that's why it's recorded with the salaries as a taxable benefit, so we can't, I mean,
Then it's not a cafeteria benefit?
it is a cafeteria benefit.
But
it goes
taxable.
in as a salary to the employees, and then it comes out, then the employees use that money to buy health insurance elsewhere. So that money is a taxable benefit to the employees.
They're paying tax on.
We pay
So
tax-
that's-
Cafeteria
the employee pays
benefits are-
taxes on that money.
Cafeteria benefits is defined, if I'm not wrong, I may be wrong, Peter, but they are pre-tax.
The Town of Southern Shores cafeteria plan is unique in itself. It is taxed. It's a tax benefit. We use that terminology for our benefit.
Well, let me ask you this, why don't we just call it salary then?
Excuse me?
Why don't we just
Why
call
don't
it
we just-
salary and it's not
I
a,
agree.
not a cafeteria plan, because my experience with cafeteria plans, they don't work that way. I just call it salary if I were you and get rid of the term, because
What's
that's what you're paying.
the auditor have to say on that classification?
Bonnie, would you respond to that, please?
That's where we've always budgeted. If you notice, when we gave you the original form, that it was budgeted under salaries for that reason, because we paid FICA, we paid the town pays FICA, retirement, and that sort of thing on it. It is salaries. That's why it was always budgeted under that line and called a cafeteria plan. Now, if the employees so choose to put their dependents on the town coverage, then that is done pre-tax, which is what the benefit of that is. But currently, there's only 2 employees who pay to have their dependents on there. Everyone else purchases their insurance elsewhere. So if it is purchased through the town on the town's policy, that is pre-tax. But otherwise, you're exactly right, it is a tax benefit. So considered, it's a benefit, but it's considered salary. So that's how, when the auditor comes, she looks at that and she considers that salary.
In the original proposed budget, it was included in the same line item. And we broke it out after the queries about what is separate, what is separate and what is not.
My suggestion would be that it be under salaries. If it can't be under health benefits, which is what it was proposed for, then it needs to be rolled into salary as a part of salary.
Well, I think I still back, what's the auditor going to approve?
Well, and that's
for
why I
us?
say if the auditor listed as salaries, that's where it needs to be.
But how would, the fact that it's used as pre-tax makes it so that it could be used by different employees different ways? Is that what's
Yes.
behind that?
That's what she just
And is
described.
that what, Bonnie, in your experience, what do you recommend in terms of line iteming this so that it is clear and that,
The council can always take the amount of money that is put into the cafeteria and make that salaries if that's what they so wish, and then from this point forward, it can just be salaries and be done with it. But it goes in the employee's check. The employees that have families that need to purchase the insurance, most times can get the insurance at a lower cost if they get an individual policy. So they use that money, which would be after-tax money, to buy coverage for their family. If they don't choose to put them on the town's policy, they can put that in their 401k, they can do whatever, but to some, most of them use that to pay for their dependents' health care coverage that they get from someone else other than the town.
And if they do that, it's taxable, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I personally like to see a separate item, because it can get buried in salaries and we can lose track of it. So that's why I want it separate.
But it is in salaries, what it shows.
In order to compare apples to apples, it is salaries, but if you put that in the salaries, then we're at a disadvantage as far as retaining employees and trying to
Yes.
hire new employees, because we don't have
the equivalent to what the other municipalities have as far as paying for dependent
That's
coverage.
correct.
So,
I just soon leave it as it is.
Can we look into the paying for dependent coverage out of the health insurance line?
We can explore that this
I
coming
mean,
year.
why do we allow people to purchase their own independent insurance for their dependents when they absorb ours or use ours for their personal use?
And that's a policy decision that the town has been operating under for several years. Several of the local governments who do provide have hardship stories. They're carrying some dependents that have astronomical acute care and accidental, due to accident and also illness, and it is reflected in their premiums. So that's the main reason why Southern Shores has never, over the last 5 or 6 years, adopted
But
that.
they have the opportunity, if they would like to purchase dependent care through us, any employee, right?
Correct. That's correct. It's expensive on our policy, for sure.
You know, just looking at the
I see no
comparison.
reason to change anything.
Well, it's a confusing line item to have cafeteria benefits when they're not really cafeteria benefits. You either put it
It's
in
only
health.
confusing if you don't understand what we're talking about.
It is.
It's only confusing if you don't know what we're
The
talking
auditor
about.
puts it in salaries. And if the auditor puts it in salaries, that's where it should be, not under a line item as a cafeteria benefit, because
But isn't it already there? I mean, you had asked Peter to break it out, so it's already there. There's no reason to change anything. He's just trying to give you the information.
it's broken out.
Only because it was requested, am I understanding?
That's
that?
correct. Yeah, we explained that at the budget retreat. That included what we term the cafeteria plan. It can be called something else, and we can certainly discuss that with the auditor, or calling it something else if there's a hang-up about the terminology.
I would check that and just, you know, it sounds to me like it's just a salary. If I want to use it for, if I want to use it to go to dinner, I can use it to go to dinner, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
You don't have to
It
purchase.
is not
You
for-
do not, it is a item that's provided for the employees for that purpose. And I believe I provided, Bonnie put together the spreadsheet what other towns provide for their dependents.
And looking at that spreadsheet, we have some of the best coverage in the county.
We're in the middle. We're in the very
We're in
middle
the
for
middle.
dependent coverage. Yes.
Looking at what we offer our employees is at the top, because they don't have any cost.
Recall, we
Most
just,
of the other towns have a cost to the employee.
recall that this year, as I explained in the budget retreat, we increased, in this budget, there's an increase on the deductible for Town of Southern Shores employees from $500 to $1,500.
Okay, then let me sum it up and just say, I would ask that they check with the auditor and see where we really should put this, because it sounds like it's apples and oranges in the budget. It's for health benefits, but we're paying it as salary. It's basically a bonus to anybody.
Can we vote on
Sure.
the motion, and then, but then I think that's fair to ask. I mean, if we're not reporting it correctly, then surely we want to report it correctly.
we are reporting it correctly. It is being reported as salaries in each department, the salary line. That money is reported in that line as salary. It's reported on W-2 as salary. It is being reported correctly.
So that's been done, so check.
That's not what
We
I
got
said.
that.
I said it's labeled cafeteria benefit. Cafeteria benefits are usually pre-tax items.
I understand that that was what the council that originally adopted that called that, and if the council wishes to change that, then we'll be glad to do that, like Peter said, but it is being reported correctly.
I would wish us to change that to salary, sir.
Do you make a motion to that?
Yes.
Vince? So now you have a motion on the floor that you want to
Just
change
change
the
it to salary.
cafeteria benefits to
I'm
salary.
not taking it away, leave it to them as salary.
Any further discussion on that? Do I have a second? Do I have a second to that motion?
second it.
It's already being reported as salary, so it's,
That's
let's
a
make
new thing.
let's make
Take
a,
that cafeteria out of the budget.
but we're making a motion on what's already being done.
I don't understand the reason for the motion, but we got a motion on the floor, and it's been
Okay.
seconded.
The motion is take that cafeteria label out of there and just make it salary.
But it's being reported as salary already. What difference does it make of what we call it internally if it's being reported as salary?
It's call it green beans. I don't care what it's called.
That's right.
Because the public doesn't understand unless we make it clear.
Well, the public.
That's why we're discussing it.
I
That's
give the
exactly
public
why
more
we're
credit than
discussing.
that.
Sorry.
I don't think the public is near as concerned as we've been led to believe about our employees' salaries. I just don't think they are. I have heard no complaints, absolutely no complaints from
Well,
anyone in this town to me about the employees' salaries.
Let's vote on it. Let's vote on it.
Let's vote on it and get moving.
All right.
All right.
All in favor of Mr. McDonald's motion to change the name
To salary.
to salary versus
And take away cafeteria benefits.
cafeteria benefits, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Opposed.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor to adopt proposed budget as presented by the town manager for the years 2016, 2017 for the town of Southern Shores. I have a second for that motion. Is there any further discussion of that motion? Council, I'd call for the question. All in favor of adopting the proposed budget 2016, 2017 as was presented, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Budget's been
What did Gary do?
adopted as proposed.
Pardon?
I voted for it.
Okay, I didn't hear you see your hand up.
I think it was 5-0. Thank you, Gary. This should be an easy one. This is under old business. Consideration of Resolution 2016-0601 seeking state funds to offset town cost share of remediation of standing water in area south of Dogwood, North Carolina Highway 12 East Dogwood Trail intersection. I just need a motion to approve that resolution, if you would, so we can move forward with that resolution to the state.
So moved.
Do I need to have a second? Has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's made and carried. Thank you. Item B, consideration of possible action of statements of qualifications received by council May the 10th from council's request for qualifications for contract engineer. Tab 7. Chris, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, in the CIP committee, we discussed this and got some good input from our citizen representatives also. Like I said before, both firms are qualified. Both firms, I feel, would do a good job. That said, there was a very large differential in cost, in unit cost, more than double. And so I asked the council to consider that as they're making their decision.
I would make a motion that we accept the RFQ from the Deal Anloff Consortium,
Engineering.
Partnership Consortium, as our town engineer for a period of no less than 3 years. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I have some concerns. I agree with what Joe Van Giesen said. I heard him during the CIP committee meeting, and I heard him also tonight in his comments. And I think it would be a good idea, and you could do this very quickly, send out a request to both bidders to answer a sample task statement, giving a very simple approach on how they're going to how they would do that task, the labor hours used, the labor rates used, and just give us a little more information. And the reason I say that, I agree. I think both of them, based on the qualification statements that they sent us, they're equally qualified. There is a disparity in the costs that they proposed, but the thing is, almost comparing apples and oranges. You don't know how they would use those labor categories. And if we put out a sample task statement for them to respond to, and they explain how they would do that task and how they would allocate hours and what the cost would be, I think we would, can make a better decision on deciding which contractor to award the contract to for town engineer. So what I'm doing is I'm amending your motion, and I'm making a motion that we send out a sample task order to both. Am I out of order?
You may not be out of order on the motion, but you may be out of order in asking for what you're going to ask for in the motion.
Okay. Was that based on state contract and statute?
There are specific, dealing with engineers, architects, and others surveying construction management at risk, there's a particular statute that applies with how you deal with the qualifications and RFPs or requests for qualifications. And what it provides in 143-64.31F is that no work product or design may be solicited, submitted, or considered as part of the selection under this article, and no cost or fees other than unit price information may be solicited, submitted, or considered as part of the selection process except for under this article. The article only allows for unit prices.
Okay.
And what it does allow for is examples of prior completed work may be solicited, submitted, and considered. And you can discuss concepts and approaches to particular projects, but I think what you're asking for, the line item, how they would bill it, is going to go into the category of what it doesn't allow you to do. And I'm not sure, this is a very confusing statute that's different than everything else, but I think that the policy there is trying to avoid asking someone to do a project ahead of time. And then, and I know you're talking about a sample, so it's a little bit different. It may not hit this because you're asking for a sample, but I think that there's a risk that it would be contrary to the statute to ask for someone to essentially do a project and break down the
No, I hear what you're saying. What the statute's intent is to keep us from getting work done free. And I'm not asking for that.
So I noticed, I remembered that being in there when Mr. Van Giesen brought it up earlier. I pulled out my statute to make sure that I understood that correctly, but that's how I understand it at this point. So I wanted to point that out before you made that motion.
Well, let me ask you this, based on their experience and one of the projects that they have completed, could we ask for them to explain how their labor costs were associated with that project, or is that proprietary information you don't think they'd share with us? I don't know.
I think what it allows for is you can ask for examples of prior completed work that can be solicited, submitted, and considered. I mean, I don't know that there's any reason why you couldn't ask for more than what they've already provided. But like you said, they may or may not be willing to tell you the price breakdown of someone else's project. But I can't answer that for them.
Well, there again, we'd probably be comparing apples and oranges, so I don't think it'll work. I'm not accustomed to this kind of contracting. I've always asked for sample task orders and gotten responses.
We had an RFQ, excuse me, we had an RFQ given to us to review by Mrs. Patrick, which she spent quite a bit of time on. I'm sure she did a lot of research. We had that to look over for about 2 weeks, and if we didn't make suggestions, recommendations back to her, how she'd like to see it changed, I think we should not go back now to the bidders and say, by the way, we're changing the rules of the game. We'd like you to do a little more work if you want this job. I don't think that's
No, I'm not
acceptable.
asking to change the rules. I'm just trying to get the best value for the town, because looking at the labor rates is comparing apples and oranges. As simple as that. And no, I'm not.
Let me ask a question.
I don't see it apples and oranges.
Well, I do. I don't see apples or oranges, I see asphalt. And a couple of the projects in this report were poorly done. Deer Path, Gravy Pond, Eagles Nest, there was some breaking, and I know that involves paver and through, but that is an engineering issue also, how it was designed and what was done and the complete project. So my question, and also Trinity's Bridge, Juniper Trail is in here. So, you know, I have a question on quality there. So, and I don't know either or, and I really didn't know anybody was involved. I just looked over both proposals. My questions are on some of the projects they've completed for us. Deer Path, just last year, fell apart.
Was that an engineering problem or a construction problem?
Well, the engineer's supposed to be on making sure that job's done correctly, isn't he? He works for us, right?
But the contractor
Right.
was the one, the contractor was the
I
one
understand
using
that,
faulty
but-
material delivery. That's not the engineer's fault.
But it was poorly done. And several projects that are listed here, I wouldn't list if I were trying to get a job. So that's my point. I mean, you don't put your worst work out there. And no offense to whoever this is, I really don't know them. And if you're here, I'm sorry. But there's some projects here that put a question mark in my mind because as we were going forward as a town, we want to have quality work.
It's a good question, but as I say, is it an engineer's problem or a construction problem? And I think, for example, Gravy Pond, and also
I
Deer
think it's a
Path,
combination of the
Well,
project
the materials used on Gravy Pond and some of the materials used on Deer Path could not have been determined apparently beforehand. They could not
Okay.
know that it's going to be defective. So the engineer couldn't have, he had a, correct me, Peter, who's the person that does the soil
Wait a minute,
testing?
wait a minute. You're trying to explain that to me. I know you're not an engineer, so,
Yeah.
and you're not a contractor.
Right.
So
But I have been.
I still have, not an asphalt
No,
contractor.
I don't do asphalt.
Well, let's move on.
I
But-
agree.
So my point is, are we getting quality for our dollar? That's a good
We
point.
control that.
Well,
Sure, you can ask the question.
We
You can ask the
we
question.
have not controlled that, sir. I mean, think about it, those are just, and I just looked at recent. Chris brought up Juniper needs to be looked at from bridge back. It's in this, it's listed in here, and that project was not done that many years ago. When you think about it. And it's all not roots.
I understand. Anything else to discuss on this?
So I would think we might want to, I looked at both of them, they both have equal qualifications, there's a difference in cost.
There's a
I
motion,
think-
there's a motion on the
I
floor.
know there's a motion.
Well, and I would say that I think that that's where the issue is. I think I've heard everyone who said anything say they have equal qualifications.
I didn't
And
say
where-
that.
Well, you just did.
Well, I take it that they both have good presentations, except this one has some questionable projects in it that I am aware of.
But what the statute says is that local governments, when they contract, get hit in either direct, no matter what kind of contracts they're doing, they get hit badly. If they're doing normal contracts, they've got to hit the lowest responsible bidder, whether or not that person's any good. And if they're doing engineering contracts, they've got to take the best qualified. If they're equally qualified, then all you have to choose between primarily is the differentiation in unit price. And I think what I've been hearing is that everyone's saying they're equally qualified. So the question is, unless there is a difference in qualifications,
When
then
you say qualifications, what do you mean?
I would
Where I
consider
went
that
to
the
college?
ability to do the job of an engineer.
So if the projects in this manual are substandard, were substandard in their original creation, Deer Path fell apart, does that take away from the qualifications, I guess is what I'm asking?
I think it would depend on whether or not it was engineer.
Well,
Like you said,
I can't answer that.
Well, I think,
I'm not.
I think what I can say, though, is that if I'm correct, most of those were corrected.
Yes.
And if I'm correct, that engineers were the ones who discovered the problem. So engineering happens at the beginning and at the end, and I don't know whose problems were whose or where they lie, so I can't answer that question. If you could determine that it was an engineering problem,
So am
then
I-
it might go to qualifications.
Okay.
But I don't know that I can't determine that. So I don't know who can. But what I've heard is that, you know, that the two firms seem to be equally qualified. And knowing both of them, I know that they both do a good job. I've dealt with John, I've dealt with Andy, so I don't know how I would deal with that any differently. But that's what the statute says. If there is a difference in qualifications, then you choose the best qualified. But if you have a way to distinguish the two, then that would be something different, but I don't have a way to do it.
Nor do I. There's a motion on the floor for consideration that we need to make a decision on. Gentlemen?
What, we voting in favor of deal?
My motion was that I made my motion was we vote to
Approve.
contract with Deal and Loft to do our engineering for the next 3 years.
And Chris second.
Sorry.
My motion was that and can you read that back to me, Sheila? Do you have it over there?
The original motion was to accept the RFQ from Deal Analog Engineering Partnership for 3 years.
And that was
Peter
seconded.
seconded.
Now I would call for the motion.
Question.
Call for the question. All in favor?
Wait a minute,
Wait a minute.
I got, okay. I'm being confused.
Okay.
In my layman's opinion, is that what I can determine the qualifications?
I would say that would be very risky.
I'm asking the question. I mean, everybody around this table's layman when it comes to looking at these contracts.
Proposals.
Proposals.
Yes. Exactly right. Exactly right. Except for Chris, perhaps.
Well, he's an architect, so he's got a little more expertise. So I'm just trying to be, I don't want us back in the same boat we were in before, where we have to go back and rebuild the street after we rebuild the street.
Well, that could happen if the contractor doesn't do his job right.
I agree with you 100%, Leo.
And I've seen that happen.
But I also know that there were other projects that were done. I didn't notice if, was the canals in here? I don't think that was in here. I think somebody pointed that out. But that was also a project that was done for the town that was, I don't know what the issue was, but it was some
Well,
lack of
without
oversight.
knowing the issue, without knowing enough about it to discuss it, you shouldn't even bring it up. Because the
Well, it
canal
cost us a
dredge.
lot of money and
the
it
canal
didn't work.
dredge, It did cost a lot of money.
And it didn't work.
It worked
And that was
fine
their
when it was all
design.
finished.
And that was their design, if I'm correct, right?
No.
No,
Okay.
that was not the design of the Enlow engineer.
But they,
That's
they
that's
brought
what's
that,
been.
but they brought that in, they brought that design to our town to use, right?
No, sir.
Who brought it?
The contractor brought it to him and asked him to do the design for him. And Mr. Amloff did that for the contractor.
To do what?
He did the design for the contractor. Did
So
not
he-
design, the contractor said, this is what I want you to design for me, and I want to be able to present it.
Well, I'm not talking about the individual, but the engineer, our engineer, this engineer designed that project.
The canal dredge project?
Yeah.
No, he did it through the contractor we hired. The methodology that was chosen to do that work was proffered by the contractor.
Right,
And the
but he
engineer, our
designed it.
engineer took that
Right.
information and designed a project for him, for the contractor.
And it failed.
It failed. The contractor's project failed, yes. Designed by Mr. Anlaw in order to expedite the time frame we had to work in. There's a lot of misunderstanding about that.
Well, and-
Without knowing all the facts, it's pretty hard to talk about it.
Okay, Deer Path, he designed that
He
project.
designed the street project, he did not do the work.
Contractor failed. I'm
Is
just
that-
saying.
is that the engineer's fault?
Seems like we're getting a lot of failure here.
Well, listen.
Just my 2 cents.
Okay, got it.
Let's move on. We've got a motion on, what are we going to do?
Hey, I don't want to belabor this, but I got a question. And I noticed before the RFQ went out, we all commented on a criteria sheet, and that was supposedly what the contractor was going to respond to, showing his qualifications based on those criteria. So we got the proposals back. Did anyone go through each proposal and go down the list of criteria and assign scores to those criteria? Was that done?
I did that.
I did it.
In other words, you got a score?
Well, I had a score, I don't have it with me now, but I had a score, yeah.
Okay, all right, I just.
Yeah, I did my work.
well,
And they
I
scored
didn't
pretty,
say
they scored,
you-
they
I
scored
didn't-
pretty evenly. I think my difference was probably
Okay.
5 or 6 points in favor of
Okay.
Deal and Amlaw.
I just asked a question.
Yeah.
Okay, let's,
I scored them, and this one came out first, that you're asking me that question.
Well, that's my whole point. I scored them also.
Yeah,
I based it on the work.
right.
Well,
And so Albemarle would be above, and I don't know who Albemarle is.
that's all the questions I have.
Go ahead and take a vote, Tom.
All in favor of my motion to move ahead with Deal Anloff Engineering Firm for our town engineer for the next 3 years, please signify by saying aye.
aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank you.
We better not have to touch the roads.
3 and 2. It'll be our fault.
I'm gonna call you out on it.
Peter,
That's fine.
new business?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Brought this to you on behalf of the town planner who serves as secretary to the planning board. There are currently 2 members whose current appointments are getting ready to expire at the end of this month. Gray Berriman and Elizabeth Morey both have indicated that they would like to be reappointed to the planning board. Just for your information, we did, for the last 6 weeks, call for volunteers from citizens for applications for appointment to town boards and commissions. We got no one applying. Gray and Elizabeth have been on the planning board for, you can see from the sheet in the tab, the length of time. It's the recommendation of staff that the council would consider reappointing Gray and Elizabeth.
Any questions?
I have a question. Do we have a list, and nothing against these 2 people, but at our meeting, our planning, we said, we tasked the manager with creating a process for all appointments and, creating a list of community members to bring forward whenever we had openings. And do we have that in place now?
We have a process in place,
Do
and
we have
we
a
called,
list?
no, we do not.
Can't.
We called out, to answer your question, we called out 6 weeks ago for volunteers to go on that list, and we did not get any.
We had no volunteers.
No volunteers. So we have a process in place, clearly, that we call out for
And how do
volunteers for
Did
boards
you
and
make
commissions
a
if
list of
things
those
are open.
volunteers?
Excuse me?
Do you make a list of those
If
volunteers?
we get applications, we do, yes. That's the process.
And how do we go about soliciting folks for those?
We go about by putting it on all our media outlets, social media, our newsletter, our website, and our 2 town bulletin boards.
Okay, I mean, we said we would make sure we were doing that and have, because we
And
had,
we are doing-
we have
we have
committees
that.
who don't have members and that kind of thing, so, all right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do we have a
I
motion?
make a motion you reappoint those.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, same sign. Motion's made and carried. Elizabeth Morey and Gray Berriman will continue to serve on the planning board. Town managers report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a short report tonight, and I think my last comment will seg into your comments, Mr. Mayor. I did want to report to you that the council's initiative to consider a historic designation program for historic properties in Southern Shores is moving along. We did send out the notices to those who have potential historic properties, and we've gotten back some good response to that. We are notifying them that we will hopefully hold an informational meeting toward the end of the summer to give those property owners who don't live here more time to think about it. And at that time, by that time, we will have met with Archives and History to come up with a further plan to bring back to you as a council to consider toward the end of the summer. The lifeguard, as Merrick described tonight, they're in business. There are 3 stands up. The 4th one will go up this weekend. There are 2 ATVs at Rove Southern Shores. So that service is up and running as anticipated. I did want to report to you that the State Wildlife Resources Commission will be conducting a census of largemouth bass in the public canals of Southern Shores toward the end of this month. And at the request of Mayor Bennett, I did contact the biologist, and they are making a visit here at the end of June to count largemouth bass in the canal system to see if the taking of largemouth bass need to be regulated. They did report to me, for your general interest, that after Hurricane Isabel and now Hurricane Irene, there is a significant growth in the population of largemouth bass in northeastern North Carolina. And they did have the canals of Southern Shores on their query list, so that matches up with your request to have them come in and do a census.
Thank you.
The last thing I want to bring up was I did send to the council the request from the town of Emerald Isle to consider filing an amicus brief on their behalf in that Supreme Court case. Supreme Court has agreed to hear that case dealing with Public Trust Beach, and also a request for donation of $2,000. With that, I'll say again to your report, Mr. Mayor, because I believe the town attorney is also prepared to answer questions or make comment on that as well. Thank you.
I got a couple of questions for the town manager, if you don't mind.
You can go ahead and ask them, sure.
Okay,
I'll sort of make my report, and you could ask them at that time after I make my report, that's all.
Go ahead and make your report.
Thank you, Fred. My report basically was to say, do we want to consider as a council supporting the town of Emerald Isle in their, by being involved in an amicus or amicus brief? And that would probably should involve some cash contribution to their cause to help them fight their legal battles. You've read the email, I think, from Peter. Does anybody have any other thoughts about that, or would they like to make a motion to do that, or make a motion not to do that?
I can, if you'd like, I can.
Explain that.
The town of Emerald Isle was, adopted an ordinance a few years ago that left a driving lane open on the beach so that they can move emergency vehicles. And just like most of the Outer Banks, they have, during the off-season, have the ability for people to drive on the beach. And they had an ordinance that required there to be an open area left on the beach so that vehicles could get through and people could get through. The owners of certain property sued them to say that that was a taking of their property and that the town needed to pay them a bunch of money, and essentially say that they own the property to the mean high water line and can exclude anyone from that property. The problem is that there's a pretty big, well, first of all, the Superior Court disagreed with the property owners. They appealed to the North Carolina Court of Appeals, and the North Carolina Court of Appeals agreed with the Superior Court and disagreed with the property owners. And for the first time, one of the few things that I have litigated a lot is the public trust beaches of North Carolina. And I've asked, I think, 15 different judges over the last few years to answer a complicated question of where can people walk on the beach? And all of them except for one refused to answer the question. The one who answered the question answered it in my favor, but he answered it at the Superior Court right before the Emerald Isle Court of Appeals opinion came out that said he was right. So what the case is about, essentially, is whether or not you and I and the citizens and tourists and everyone else can walk up and down the beach between the dune and the water. The Court of Appeals opinion says yes. And the owners want to say no. And they want to say that you use a mean high water line to distinguish where the property ownership ends, and that you can't be landward of that line. But the line that they want to use is essentially in the water all times. There would be nowhere to walk that you wouldn't be wet on the northern Outer Banks. So what an amicus brief is the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court has taken review of the Court of Appeals decision. So the property owners have filed their appeal with the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to consider it. Emerald Isle is a party to that action, so they will also file a brief, and they will be a party, and they will argue back and forth. And an amicus, it's an amicus curiae brief, and what it is a friend of the court. So it's a third-party groups who have an interest in the outcome of the case can petition the court to say, hey, we're out here too, and we want to file a brief and tell you what we think the law is, and we want to pick a side and help one side or the other. Right now, the town would not be a party. It would be an amicus. It would sign on to a brief. Right now, the way that is looking is that I will probably be preparing a brief for a number of towns on the northern Outer Banks. And another attorney will be preparing a brief for a number of towns on the southern Outer Banks and counties, and anybody else who wants to sign on and essentially split costs. I don't think there's any requirement that you put any money in. I think that the primary goal of Emerald Isle is to have as many interested entities who are in favor of its position as it can on the briefs. And to clarify, this is not a question about public access from the roadway to the beach, from Highway 12 to the beach, from Ocean Boulevard to the beach. It's not a question of that. This is a question of your ability to walk up and down the beach. That's, if the Supreme Court changes the Court of Appeals decision, there is a risk that they will make it so that you cannot lawfully walk up and down the beaches in North Carolina. It could affect all of North Carolina. It wouldn't affect all of North Carolina. There are some beaches that are actually owned by, Wrightsville Beach owns its beaches due to some legislation. But it would affect the northern Outer Banks greatly. It would affect our ability to not only walk up and down the beach, but to have Merrick patrol up and down the beach. If they came down the wrong way, it would make it so that when you go to a public beach access in Southern Shores, if you live not on the ocean front, that you would be limited to the bounds of that public beach access to get to the water. So I think that's what the real issue in the case is, and I don't want people to be confused. Oftentimes in litigating this, the other side tries to make it about making access across people's property to get to the beach, and that's not what this is about. This is about access up and down the beach. So to be an amicus, it's a supporting brief. It's a brief to take a position in that regard. Nags Head, Duck, Kitty Hawk, Dare County have signed on to be a part of that one way or another, whether I'm doing their brief or someone else. And I think all of them have put so far $2,000 towards that. I think Kill Devil Hills is going to consider it this week. I'm not sure where Currituck stands, but I suspect that they'll have some interest in considering it at some point. But that's an explanation of what this is and what it's about.
Wasn't this issue litigated in Currituck?
No.
Was there a case that was dismissed?
Yes.
Similar issue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There was a case that never reached the merits. The Nyes v. Emerald Isle case is the only recent case that has tried to answer the question of what is the delineation of the public trust beaches. So that's where this case came down.
Did that answer your question, Ursula?
Yes,
Thank you. Peter, what's involved if we decide we want to do a $2,000 support money for this?
Seeing that we only have 3 weeks to go, I would suggest
We've got more. There's an extension. There wouldn't have to be a brief filed until July 27th.
I said June 22nd.
There's been an extension.
Okay.
But It's July 27th, but if I'm doing it, I'd rather have more time than less if there are going to be parties doing it. So, and I know I'm already doing it for others, and it would not be separate briefs for everybody involved. It would just be everybody's name added to one brief.
That being the case, Mr. Mayor, if someone made a motion, they could just direct the budget officer to appropriate it out of the budget that was just approved after July 1, and I can find a line to pay it from.
That's fine. Council, what's your pleasure?
I move that we contribute the $2,000 to contribute to the cost of this filing.
Of the amicus brief?
Of the amicus brief.
And the money's toward Emerald Isle's case?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't believe it's a separate monetary. There is some confusion about how the money is going to be paid, whether it's going to be paid directly to the attorneys who are doing the briefs or paid through Emerald Isle, and then they're going to pay the attorneys who are doing the brief. But otherwise, essentially what you want to do, if you would like to be involved, is to be on the brief and to designate funds to be provided however the mechanism ends up being.
Can we take that as a motion?
Sure.
Did you get that, Sheila?
Council, is there a second to the motion that Mr. Holliday? Do I have a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Well,
Signify.
I'll just gonna say one thing.
Oh, go ahead.
As part of discussion. I've been to beaches up in New England where that is the case, and you've got strict delineations. Every beach is private, so literally you can't do what we do here and walk down the beach. They have clubs, and you're stuck in your little area, and the result of that is you get tons of people in one little area and 2 or 3 people in the other area, and it's just a really, coming from here, it's a really odd situation, and it seems like it strikes against the spirit of what we've got here.
Yeah, it would have a definite impact on our tourist dollars.
We had a 4 and a hesitancy, so you got a 4 vote already, sorry.
So we're good.
Yeah.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, same sign. So the motion is made and carried to support the town of Emerald Isle and their amicus brief, and just also send them $2,000 to whoever's supposed to get it. That's all I have. Council members, comments and responses. Let's start with the Mayor Pro Tem on the end down there.
Okay. I got a couple of things, most of them are fairly minor, but one of them I think is pretty important, and this is directed toward the town manager. During, well, I got several directed toward you, Peter. During the budget retreat, I think most of us were talking about there would be some value to the town staff developing historical trends of our budget over the last 3 to 5 years, and also attempting to forecast our budgets over the 3 to 5 years in the future. And I thought that was direction that the council gave the town manager, but when asking for status, he clearly told me that he didn't have direction to do that. So I'm bringing it up again. I think it's a good business practice for budgeting that we do have historical trend data to show where we've been in the past, and also I think we should forecast our expenses for the future so we can plan our budgets better. So as a result of that discussion, I would like to make a motion that the council direct the town manager to develop historical trends and forecasts over the next 3 to 5 years and 3 to 5 years in the past.
Do I have a second, Council, for Mr. Newberry's motion?
I have a question before we go there. We did direct that in our planning session.
We discussed it.
No, we directed because she put it on the minutes. I mean, we've already done this, is my point. When she put it on her, excuse me, her printout and had it on the minutes that would be done. that was a next step. Just like getting a list of volunteers and folks for committee. I mean, that was a direction from the council. And I will second your motion there, but there's no need to redo that, in my opinion, because we directed it at the planning session.
I don't have a recall of us directing that, maybe we did. Do you recall directing that?
I think it was just gray enough, but I'd support Mr. Newberry's proposal, but I would ask if you could work with Peter and staff to help determine the criteria, Fred, that'd be great, because so much of it is kind of how you measure, and so let them do a draft maybe, and then if you could kind of look at the draft with them and make sure that it's in a format the council would want to see.
Okay.
Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, I'm willing to do it. I'm not going to do it for the staff.
No,
but
I'm not saying
I'll
that.
be glad to
You need
review
to
it.
You need to help lay out a template for them, or with them.
I'd like for them to take a stab at it first.
That's fair. I think that's fair,
Yeah.
but just do a review before coming back to us, and could you report back to us
Sure.
what you've come
Sure.
up with the staff?
Yeah, we can do.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment, just an observation?
Yes.
The 3 to 5 year trending, historical trending in the past has already been done. That's reported to you out. I don't know where the misunderstanding is occurring on that, but that's clearly shown by the finance officer. We can go back and pick up even more years if you want to on the historical trending. But that's shown even in the budget development stage. So I'm not sure where the misunderstanding on that, the strategic plan, I'm not sure where the,
You're talking, are you,
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, you're doing past, right?
I'm following
You're
what,
talking about projected.
No,
he clearly
I'm talking
said
about
3 to
both.
5 years in the
He's talking
past.
about both,
I'm talking about
We
both.
talked about this. I mean, we worked on it all day. Where is it?
not really.
It's not in the strategic plan. If it was, I would have brought that to your attention. And I will say, just to follow up, so there's not any misunderstanding. I don't want there ever to be, don't want any animosity about me not doing my performance. But I will do what this council directs me to do by action of the council.
I'm not saying for that,
Yeah.
saying that. If you felt like you didn't get direction, I'm asking the council to give you
Sure.
direction tonight.
Right, and
That's my
I just want to bring up that we already do a 3 to 5 year trend now of historical numbers. In the future, I will be glad to develop, as you said, Chris, I would recommend to the council that you consider having either a council member or having us work with the finance officer to create something that's meaningful, because otherwise we're going to bring to you something that's got a lot of asterisks on it as far as the revenue projections. We can keep the same expense lines exactly the same as they are this year and project that out for you and just do a CPI on the expenses.
Well, you can extrapolate, you can put cost factors in, there are a lot of things you can do.
We can-
But just throw up your hands and put asterisks, I don't see the point in that.
That's what it would be, though, because we have to tell you, we would be inserting numbers that could change in 6 months.
Well, no, I understand that, but the,
But you could also project out, like, you've already sent us an email, the state legislature's changes the way the tax codes are working, so we're gonna probably lose some monies next year.
No, that's a Powell bill that got changed.
That's right. And those
The tax code has not changed,
Yeah.
though.
You sent us one about we're gonna lose, what, $40,000 out of the distribution of what's coming back to the county.
That's a pending bill. Yeah, that is not passed.
So those kinds of things you could put in there as an actress, we'd know what's coming up and what we've got. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do.
well, and
Just to be clear, Councilman Newberry, those type things, we would not know to put in unless they passed.
well, anytime you forecast, it's best guess, and the best guess can be based on fact, and a lot of that fact is on historical data, and that's why I think it's critical to do historical trend analysis, taking that data and knowing or having a good idea of what you're planning to do in the future. Good example, street rebuild projects. We got a list of 20 projects there. We can forecast out what those are going to cost based on what it's cost in the past and applying some kind of notional inflation cost or whatever. That can be your asterisk, however you want to do it. But I'm not going to lay it out for you.
I understand.
To me, I think it's pretty straightforward. You've got the data to do it, so let's do it.
I want to make sure council clearly understands on the example that you just gave, it would be $516,000, that's your policy each year, just like the way the Duck does it, and town of Duck does it. So I don't have any directive to either increase or decrease it over
Well,
time.
my point is, if we can forecast, we may be able to determine that 516 is not a good number, and maybe we ought to change that number. But without a forecast or having more data, how can we make that determination? That's the whole point in trend analysis and forecasting, is to be able to put a budget out in 3 to 5 years so we can plan for it, so we know what to expect rather than reacting in these meetings to a request to approve a certain project. I'd like to know what those projects are and what they're going to cost in the future. Now, again, best guess, but it's based on fact.
I understand that totally, and unless the council wants to change its policy on how much money it puts for new street projects, we would have no choice but to put $516,000 over the next 5 years. And that's what, other than that, we would be ostracizing anything that you gave us parameter-wise otherwise.
Would you work with them, Fred, to kind of get that?
Yeah, I'll work with them, but just take an arbitrary number or an agreed-on number of 516 doesn't really tell me much.
But to us, it's not arbitrary because that's the council policy.
Okay,
That's been the
and it
policy.
is council policy, but like for this budget we just did, we added in $300,000 for an intersection. We added in $100,000 for a survey.
Right.
So we're piecemealing when the capital improvement planning group should be outlining where we're going and what we're doing, and then we can fund it. And that's what he's asking. And we're ready to take a vote, sir.
You could not have anticipated the problem we having a Dogwood Trail 3 years or 5 years ago. I think that's kind of
Wait a minute.
pushing.
Water's been on Highway 12 since 20 years.
That's exactly
I've been
right,
here.
but it wasn't as severe as it was the last 6 or 7 months.
Yes, it has been. And not just that Dogwood Trail, but Highway 12 from between here and Hatteras. We live in a low-water area. That's where we live.
Can we all agree to give it a shot and see what we come up with, and we can evaluate its value later? And then go from there. I don't think it hurts to try.
I second it.
No, okay. No, I agree. I tell you, I've been doing business like this for years and years. I don't see it's that hard. I really don't.
It won't be that hard for us to create a budget for each year with the same line items, no question about it. We can trend out, anticipate an increase in revenue. Bear in mind, you may have a year when revenue goes down, as Ducks shows. But as far as the parameters of it on things that are already set, that's what would be on those budget lines.
So restate the motion. if you would.
Okay, the motion is, I would like for the council to direct the town manager to develop historical trend data over the last 3 to 5 years, whatever, how much data you got. I assume you've got 5 years worth. And also forecast our budget for the next 3 to 5 years. There again, we can go either way, 3 to 5.
I'd stay with 3.
Okay, we'll stay with 3.
I've been down at 5, I've been down 10 on the private side, and it just gets too fuzzy when you get by 3 years.
All right, let's go 3 years. We go 5 years historical trend data, and we'll go 3 years forecast data.
And I second that.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All in favor say aye, I'm sorry.
Aye.
We all did.
All
Passed.
opposed? Same sign. Aye.
Okay, I got a couple.
Motion carried.
Okay. I got another item that I would like for the council to consider to direct the town manager, and that is our newsletter. I would like to be able to give council members, each council member, an opportunity to write a column if they want to, so we can provide differing opinions on town business. And I know, Mary, you have written a few in the past, giving your views on things, and I think to give a balanced view, it would be a great opportunity for individual council members to give their views. We could alternate among ourselves. And so what I'm proposing is a motion for council members to contribute columns to the Southern Shores newsletter.
Do I have a second to that motion?
If he wants to
Have a
write a
second.
column, I'll be glad to.
I got it. Any discussion, council? Leo, any thoughts?
No, I just don't want to do it. I got too many other things to do, and I think the way it's being written.
I'm with you, Leo.
Yeah, with the way it's being written now is fair to it, and if anybody wants to put a topic in, they're more than free to do so, if I understand it.
I agree with what you said, Leo. What about you, Chris?
I guess I'd agree with Leo too, as long as it's not an obligation. I think if a council member wants to write, let them write.
I'd agree with that. I think it's individual council members. Would you have any trouble with that? Any issue with that?
Anytime anybody wants to put anything in it, they can certainly submit that.
I think Tom should write one every time, don't you think?
We can.
I mean, that's been the case. We have just never had that come up in a discussion with individual council members, but
I would suggest, Fred, that we just do what we just talked about. If you want to put something in the newsletter, just make sure they have the town staff has it in time to put it in the newsletter that week.
Yeah.
We got a motion on the floor, though, in a second.
Yeah, I'd like to vote on the motion because I don't want to run into the same problem that the council didn't direct to put
All right,
something
that's
in the
fine.
newsletter.
I agree.
All in favor of Fred's motion to have council members submit written articles for the newsletter
Voluntarily.
Should they choose?
voluntarily?
No.
Give me the wording.
Say aye.
All in favor?
Yeah, all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
3-2.
so, question for me, do you want to establish a protocol for who sends what when? You asked for I'm asking you for direction on that, because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding about whether we send something out and we didn't ask you or whatever. I didn't know which one of you wants to start, do you alternate, et cetera?
I got one.
Since I made the motion, I'll start it. I don't have a problem, and we can alternate and go in whatever order we want to.
Why don't we just say that if a council member has something to say any particular month, let him say it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think you need to alternate. If
Okay.
Leo doesn't feel like saying something, that's fine. If he does, then just, Peter, if you could email us the deadlines so that we know when it has to be in by.
If,
Then
That's fair enough.
and I think that's right. Just, let's direct town manager to establish a deadline when it has to be in
fair enough.
and get it to us.
So I'm understanding now that anybody and all can submit articles for a particular newsletter. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any council member, right?
Any council member.
Council member.
Right.
All right.
Okay, and I have one last thing, and this is a pretty simple question. Could you give us the status of the code update project?
Yes, the last time they were here, they informed the council that they would be finishing up their work and coming back to us toward the beginning of September. So that's when we'll hear from them again.
Okay. So what are they doing right now?
They're putting together all the comments and work that they did before to create the the assessment, the code assessment. That's what you'll get next,
Okay.
that document.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Holland?
No comments. We've been here damn near 3 hours, so let's move on.
Chris?
I don't have any comments.
You really don't? I do. I would like to schedule a closed session at the next meeting to discuss and vote on releasing closed session minutes, since we've had a request for opening a closed session minute.
Is that a problem, clerk? Town manager?
She's already got it on the list to schedule it
It's
for next
a
month.
process, and I discussed that with, I was going to make a motion to do something
But you
tonight,
don't- you don't have
but
to.
after talking with the attorney, he said that we have a process, and
Yeah.
that's the way to follow it.
That's good. That's all we have to do. So that'll be scheduled for the next meeting. Anything else?
I'd like to direct Peter to respond to, there's a lady keeps writing me, and I know she writes all of us about beach nourishment, and I know you've responded to her once, but
I've
to
responded
check
to her.
and respond to her again, please. This section over here, and that was a good explanation, by the way, that Kitty Hawk's coming this way, but we need to look at that and see if there's something we need to do there. If we have a beach nourishment problem on the front, in front of this area, which is directly across from Southern Shores. And
The south end of our beach.
yes, the very south end of our beach. I got another letter from her today, and I guess she's from Texas. 'Cause that's-
Denison,
Yes,
Texas.
Denison, Texas.
And owns property right here.
Right.
So if we could direct him to check that and update her. I know
He's
you have.
responded to her already.
I know, but please do it again.
As town manager, I'll be glad to respond to her with the same information
I know.
that I have available to me, y'all, the policymaking
Well,
boards. but
and actually, look at it, Peter, and see if we need to look into becoming a part of that on the south end of our beach. I mean, we need
Become a
to
part of what?
part of renourishment with Kitty Hawk, if there's a way to pull something in there. Hey, we're spending money tonight.
Yeah. It's a little more complicated than that.
Yes, it is. But
That's an item, Councilmember McDonald and the council, I would certainly proceed with if that's the pleasure of the council. I'm here in beach nourishment.
Don't we have to get an engineer from Wilmington? And then isn't there some legal side of that has to come into it as well? Because if you're going to do it, we can't just do a portion of it. You got to do the whole thing, otherwise it's not cost prohibitive. It's cost prohibitive.
If the council directed me to bring to you the experts necessary for you to start discussing beach nourishment, I would bring the current engineer who's doing the projects on the beach, invite him, as well as the finance person for the town's preferred lender, and also Ben would join us as well for that discussion if that's what council wants to start.
Do you want to make a motion to start that, Gary, or not?
I just want him to respond to this lady.
That's the easy part.
Which we've been doing, which he'll continue to do, I'm sure.
I know he has.
I'll respond again.
So you don't want to at this time make a motion that we look into a beach nourishment project?
I'm not supporting that we do beach nourishment at this time, no.
Thank
But
you.
I would, I mean, I don't know, I've not been on the south end. I don't know how bad it is.
Northeasters this past fall and winter and spring did significant amount of damage to that dune line down there. There's no question about that.
Can I ask Peter one question to that point? The timeline is, if you wanted to do such a project, it's a lot of time to even get to the point of doing that. You know, so, you know, what would we be looking at? If we ever did it, would it be a year, 2 years? What, I mean,
It would be, we would start out in the discussion, and it would be, you'd anticipate at least a 4-year window.
Okay.
Of course, you know, there would be some legal issues or legal matters that would need to be considered. One in particular, maintenance access to the beach. There would be the financing component, and then, of course, the engineering component.
We've been following this beach nourishment project work in Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk and Duck now for the last 2 years, and attended most of their meetings. And the big issue, besides the engineering and all the legal stuff, is also the financing, the money. And the the way the wheel's turning right now, it would probably be 3 to 5 years before the county would have money to help us with a project should we decide we want to do one. That's kind of long and short of it. And that's conservative. Any other business, council?
Town attorney's comments?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm glad for you to move on to the motion to adjourn, Mr. Mayor. Don't have anything else to say.
I was waiting for you to tell me that. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Meeting is adjourned. And I want to thank all of you for sticking around tonight. I appreciate it.